ADD is a common sales rep thing. Like, it was so funny. I had this guy, he goes, there's 3 common traits in salespeople. He goes, they have ADD, they're money driven, and I'm trying to think of the third one. It was like they're social or something like that. Like ADD, money driven, and social. And it's interesting. So like when you deal with these people that keep getting derailed, like the discipline, the consistency with an ADD person, there's some conflict there. Like, how do you help an individual when they seem to always be getting derailed and you're like, dude, just like do the thing every day. And they're like, I try. And how do you help people, if I'm a manager, stick my people to be disciplined or stick myself to be disciplined?
So I think there's a few things. One is make it easier, right? Like, people typically don't stick with things because they're either difficult or it's just too much. It's like, I've got my perfect morning routine, right? And it's like, I'm doing the whole miracle morning. And it's like, but if one of those things gets thrown off, then the whole day's shot, and it's like, okay, well, let's start again next week or something. Where it's like, okay, well, let's pick one. Like, what's one thing that you can do every day? And so just simplify it down to, I don't know, you talk about the 80-20 rule. Like you're going to get 80% of the benefits from 20% of the things you're doing. And so if you just choose, like, okay, I'm going to just do one piece of that morning routine, the one that's going to give me the 80%, then they're going to be much more likely to do it. The other piece is, ADD is such an interesting thing because it's also, I don't know if you've read any of the books that call it a superpower, because people with ADD can do things often that other people either can't or are unwilling to do, and especially in sales. And so I think a lot of times people look at it as like a curse, or like, oh, I can't do certain things, or I get thrown off. But the reality is it's actually a superpower that you can use you just need to shift your perspective on it. I think another simple thing is just like coming back. Like I was saying before, it's like and being okay with being thrown off. And I think there's so much judgment there, where when we feel bad, we feel guilty, we feel like we've screwed up, we've made a mistake, something's wrong with me. But the reality is, like, that happens to everybody. And when you get thrown off, acknowledge it, be like, oh, it's just like meditation. Like, I meditate every day and I suck at it. I seriously, I lay there and I'm doing the things and I'm like, I haven't even been paying attention. I'm off to my to-do list for the last 2 minutes. But it's okay, because now I'm going to bring it back and I'm going to pay attention to like 2 breaths, and then I'm going to be off, thinking about my to-do list again. But then I'll bring it back, right? And I think there's a big piece to like being okay with making mistakes.
Yeah.
And just having a specific place to come back to as soon as you realize that you're off.
It's almost, I would say, and maybe correct me if you're wrong, or if I'm wrong, ADD isn't the impediment to success. It's the superpower, in my opinion. Like, I'm so happy that I have like the ability to juggle and move on and quick decisions and act. And I almost think it's this attachment to perfection that I think a lot of people, that's really a bigger roadblock, in my opinion. It's the OCD that could hurt you in sales, because you're like, okay, until I have the perfect script, and you're like, dude, there's no perfect customer responding to perfect script, so therefore just talk, be you, and oh, I don't know the lines yet, or I don't know so much about the product. There's always more to learn about the product. Then he's going to ask you a question that's totally irrelevant to what you studied about the product, and then what? So, and it's when I know, I will then be good, instead of just saying, cool, full send, there is no perfect good, there is no perfect way it needs to look, because I've looked at every which way I've closed a deal, and there's so many different ways I've closed deals. I mean, sometimes it's a high five at the end, be like, all right, we're going, let's do this. And they're like, yeah. And sometimes I'm like sly and smooth, and they're like, we just did this? And I'm like, yep. And I'm like, oh, I hope they don't say no. You know what I mean? It's like in the back of your head, like, it's working. And then sometimes you walk yourself out of that house and they're like, you're just kicking yourself and you're like, wow, that didn't work. Totally backfired. You know what I mean? And I think the element of ADD is such a superpower in sales. It's the OCD that I tell people, beware of that, because it's that impediment to action, because you're nervous that it's not going to look or be the same way. Like what you're saying, it's this like, it's got to be perfect and it's going to be this certain way, instead of like that one customer you thought was going to call you back that was like the lay down will never call you back. And it's that next door that's like a complete dick that all of a sudden is like, yeah, fine, let's just do it. And you're like, wow, I was so dead set on Timmy buying and all of a sudden Steve bought. You're like, what the heck? Like, anyway, it's just so fun sales. Like, I'm like, there is no perfectness to it. And that's maybe why ADD is the superpower.
Well, I love this conversation because I always ask you, like, why did they make pads? Like protection, like gear is like this multi-million-dollar, maybe even billion-dollar industry. And guess who wears pads? People who are starting out for the very first time, and professionals, and everyone in between. And it's because there's an expectation to fall. Like, it's expected that you're going to fail, that you're going to make mistakes, and you're just giving yourself a little bit of protection so that when you do, you don't die. Right? And so, and I think it's just interesting because in sales, like, yeah, you're not going around wearing a helmet, but you still got to realize that, like, it's not about perfection. It really is just about just taking the action, and expecting to fall and expecting to use the paths.